fulfilling entrepreneurial dreams within large companies. Just curious, how many people here are TiE members? Okay. And how many of you got an email or something through any of your UC Berkeley connections? I just want to know how many people got that email. Okay, I guess those people didn't show up today. Very few. Okay, few of us. Okay. So how many people here work in large companies? Okay, so I guess it's the right audience. All of our startup folks didn't show up today because they didn't think that that was going to be useful to them, and we thought we'll make it useful for everyone. So welcome. Since many of you are TiE members, I won't bore you with a lot of details about what TiE is about, since you already know it. You know that we are the largest entrepreneurial organization in the world, and many of you have probably been to TiEcon, right? Has everybody been to TiEcon? Okay, so many of you still have not been to TiEcon, so I would recommend when it comes around in the middle of May, please sign up early if you want to get the best pricing on it. It is the largest entrepreneurial conference in the world, and actually Worth Magazine rated us amongst top 10 in the company of TED and Demo and other very well-known conferences in this world, which probably cost a few $1,000s more than what TiEcon does. So look out for that. It happens in the second week of May. I think this is 18th and 19th this year. And as you all know, that TiE also does we do about 60 or so sessions every year. And I don't know how many of you were there for a session yesterday. Anybody here? Okay. A few of you were there yesterday. And you can always go to our website and look at various events. We do some events which are, there's a monthly event called My Story, where we have an entrepreneur come and share his or her success as to their journey and what they did right, what they learned from it, what was good, what was not so good. So if you haven't looked at that, you can check in the calendar. I think the November one has already been done. The next event on that is in December 4th. We are also doing events now in San Francisco, so if any of you work in San Francisco and can't always make it, October 30th there is an event in San Francisco on the social media side. And then we also do an event called Pitch Fest, and if you or anyone you know has a startup where they are just trying to get their pitch right, they can come in and pitch in front of a judge of 6 people and get a real-time feedback. And for people who are ready to get their companies funded and they are in a little bit later stage and need some better advice before going in front of a VC, you can come to a mock session of VC one-on-one with actually a real VC and get a feedback in real time in terms of your pitch as well. So I would encourage every one of you to please take a look at various sessions that are there on the site, and tell your friends and others to come and join us as well. So rather than taking any more time, let me just welcome Rish Mishra, our president of TiE Silicon Valley, and he'll introduce the panel. Rish.
So, this is really, one of the, I just feel so good about how this event has come about. Genesis of this began about 5 months ago when Arnav, he is a long-time TiE volunteer, super sincere, and he's an EIR at UC Berkeley, and he came and talked to me about this program that UC Berkeley was doing, and we met, and then we pulled in Ashok Ramaswamy, our board member and membership chair, and then later on Paul Singh, who just met, and we said, let's do something together. And so that's how this thing has come about. And looking at what this is going to be tonight, I think we're going to do at least about 3 to 4 more next year. So thank you very much for really making time available for it. One thing about our TiE membership, as you know, Paul talked about, TiE, we're the world's largest organization for entrepreneurs. But what has happened that over time, our membership has also evolved where we attract a lot of professionals. These are the industry executives, okay, the vice president level, CEO level, director level, senior director level, manager level, who really are working for large companies, but they kind of want to come to TiE because they want to kind of, keep up with what is going on in the innovation and entrepreneurship world. So we said, gee, should we design some program that caters just to the professionals like yourself who are in the room tonight? And we started one with How to Accelerate Your Career with Elizabeth Chu recently, the last night session. Some of you came already, that was awesome. And tonight's session is pretty much in the same dimension. Just looking at who is in this hall today, and so I feel extremely happy that we have accomplished that purpose already. The company represented here, besides Google, Cisco, SAP, which are on the panel here, we got Applied Materials, KLA10 Code, Intel, Covat, LSI Logic, Us.com, Infosys, TCS, eBay, PayPal, Variant, QLogic, Infinera, Juniper Networks, Charles Schwab, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, Ericsson, and Wells Fargo. Just look at that. You guys all representing large company and multi-billions of revenue, and you're all successful. So I hope that this panel will do a great job, maybe helping you decode the secret of how they've been so innovative in their own companies. I'd like to introduce formally Dr. Ikhlaq Sidhu. There's a lot to be said about him, but I will just be kind of brief, and he will actually introduce the panel. So Ikhlaq is the founding director of what you call Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at UC Berkeley. In 2005, he became part of that. He also is the founder and the chief scientist and the chief and a professor actually of engineering leadership at this institution that's called Fung Institute at UC Berkeley. And this is a wonderful institution, and there'll be more about that both are now, and Victoria Howell, who's in the room way in the back, she's with him. They can tell you more, and there's flyers on the table, so you can take a look at that. But the good thing about him is that besides him being a wonderful academic, he also brings a wealth of industry experience. He worked for 3Com US Robotics, and actually in 1999, he was named the Inventor of the Year at 3Com. I mean, 3Com had thousands and thousands of people working, so that's awesome accomplishment. Well, Ikhlaq for you. Also, he has 61 patents to his credit in the networking space in general. So covering every aspect of networking. So he's just a prolific individual, and we could not have found any better person than Ikhlaq to really moderate this panel and help also design. So Ikhlaq, may I just call you to the podium and you do your thing.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone. It's actually my turn to welcome you, and I'm very happy to be able to do that. So welcome on behalf of both TiE Silicon Valley, and welcome on behalf of UC Berkeley as we're doing this event together. Title is, of course, Fulfilling Entrepreneurial Dreams Within Large Companies. And in essence, what we're talking about is intrapreneurship, starting new things within your company. I thought I would just mention a little bit about the history of this term. It was popularized in a September 1985 Newsweek article where Steve Jobs, at that time, was quoted to say that the Macintosh team within Apple was the intrapreneurs within Apple. And since then, the name has somewhat stuck. And what are we talking about in terms of being an intrapreneur? It is people who take direct responsibility, hands-on responsibility for turning ideas, concepts into products, into action, into businesses, into revenue, building a business, starting with the concept and within the company. And this involves assertive risk-taking that you're taking. You may not leave the company, but you are taking risks inside the company. And it involves innovation, literally doing innovation within the company, and there is reward as well. In terms of building, what you get out of it, and both the achievement and actual reward, monetary reward, I suppose, titles, all kinds of other things. So with this kind of as the entryway into our conversation, I'm about to introduce our panel in a second, and believe me, we couldn't get a better, more distinguished set of panelists here. I'm very happy that you have made the time to join us and to contribute to the panel. I'm just going to lay out a little bit of the framework for how this conversation will roll out. Part of this conversation is what kind of a concept, what is the characteristic of something that can turn into a larger thing within the company? How do you kind of build that momentum? How do you build stakeholders, the coalitions, all of that that gets it launched? And then we're going to have a little bit of a reflective discussion on what are the issues and what can go wrong, what are the people issues, the balancing side of that. And out of this, what can we learn for the next time around and for the next generation of people who do the little new ventures inside the company and the big new things that are going to come out. So with that, I'm going to basically go ahead and tell you a little bit about the panelists. Not in any particular order, not even in alphabetical order, I'll just say, I'm going to introduce the panelists. It's really in the order I wrote it down on the piece of paper. So first, Buck G, former president of Andiamo, I have to get that pronunciation right too, Andiamo Systems. This is a spin-in, spin-out, and spin-in Cisco Systems. And through this activity of spinning out and spinning in, he's really pioneered the model for how Cisco has done this, creating these ventures and bringing them back in. And this was done with Nuovo and with Insieme, two companies that came later on that were spin out and in. Then Sam Yen, who's the global head of design and user experience at SAP. He's also co-founder of Covina Incorporated. He has a PhD from Stanford, and he's taught in the D School. So excellent background for today's topic. Shailesh Shukla, Vice President General Manager of Corbu, that is in Cisco Systems, that is converged optical and routing business, and he's previously been an executive at Juniper and at Redback and with a number of other companies prior to this. And Samir Samat, Vice President of Product Management at Google. He leads the shopping team. He's been the founder of two separate firms, funded also by InQtel, which is the CIA partially funded venture fund. Are you under some sort of top secret clearance from this? He's served as an executive vice president at Kofax, which is a public firm in the content management services space. So again, excellent panel. I'm going to do my best to keep up with these guys in terms of content. And I'm going to just sit right here. Why don't I start you off with a question from here, and then I'll join you in 1 second. So basically, I think the way that we should start this discussion is each of you, and I think we'll kind of go down this order exactly. Give us some flavor, some characteristic of something that has started small, maybe a founding person or a couple of people, and has grown into something bigger, and tell us a little bit about the process of how momentum was built, how resources came together, just how it grew up. So please, Sam.
Okay, so how many people use SAP?
Can you use the mic?
How many people use SAP? How many people like the user experience in SAP? Okay, yeah, so I've got a tough job. I took on this job really about a month and a half ago, so it's a new role for me. But this position and this responsibility actually came as about, from the story that I'm going to tell right now. About a year and a half ago, we started something called the App House. and it's spelled APPHAUS. And there's a brand new technology at SAP that it's an in-memory database technology and all that stuff. And my boss, the CTO, one of the board members of SAP, Vishal Sikka, wanted me to drive some sort of initiative to launch lots and lots of applications on this new technology. He wanted to call it an application factory. But then, I talked to my team, and it was a small team at the time, it was about 20 to 25 people. And nobody wanted to go to work, get up, go to work at a factory. So they said, okay, first thing we gotta do is we gotta change the name. So we changed the name to App House, and HAUS is spelled in the German term for the, as an homage to our German culture, our corporate culture. But it's also kind of, it's also, for those of you that know Bauhaus, Bauhaus was the design movement in the early 1900s. So it's kind of, it was this kind of a secret code name where, we're bringing design to these new applications. And that's that's part of the essence of what we are bringing design to the masses, just like Bauhaus brought design to the masses within Germany. He wanted us to work in a completely different way. He wanted us to reach completely new markets for SAP. So as most of you know, SAP is enterprise software. So would you be surprised that we actually now do consumer software as well? So the App House team was this little startup organization within SAP that was supposed to build a completely new set of applications to reach consumers, which isn't too far away. It's one adjacency away from SAP. SAP, we have a lot of manufacturing customers. Their customers are consumers. So our customers' customers are consumers. So what Vishal was trying to do is he was trying to launch something that reached a new set of users for SAP. And he wanted us to try to do this in a startup type of mentality. So, as my background, I was a co-founder in a startup organization, within the Valley. There's a lot of people on my team that also have that kind of background. So we did something completely different. Number one, building consumer applications. Number two, building applications in 60, 90-day release cycles. You could tell, enterprise software is usually on 12, 18-month release cycles. So completely doing things in a different way within the organizational processes, transforming those things. And then creating kind of a completely different set of user experiences necessary to compete in the consumer market. So what we did was we acted just like we would do at a startup. We didn't go through facilities. We called up our old commercial real estate agent. We said, find us a startup location. We're not a startup. Find us a startup location 5 minutes from SAP, close enough to the main headquarters so we remain connected, but far enough away so we could experiment and we could actually create a startup environment. And later on in the discussion, I've got some pictures and I could talk to you about that. But over a year and a half, it's been very successful. We started off a team of about 20. We built a location here in Palo Alto. We've been able to grow in about a year or two, about 50 people worldwide. We created App House locations in not only Palo Alto or Los Altos, but also Shanghai, Bangalore, and then we scaled it up in Dublin, Ireland. So the other locations were about 25, 30 people. In Dublin, Ireland, we actually made it and scaled it up to support a development organization, about 125 people. About a month and a half ago, because of the success that we've had in our consumer applications, we have over 100,000 people using those consumer applications on top of SAP's newest technology. I was asked to take what we've done in the App House and scale it even bigger. So now the new organization is about 500 people within SAP. We also have the responsibility of bringing that consumer experience that we've done with the consumer applications and bringing that kind of experience back to the enterprise solutions. So hopefully that's my goal. My goal is to make SAP applications as easy to use and as friendly as what you would find at the App Store. Consumer-grade experiences for enterprise applications.
Okay, all right, great.
Sam, that's really interesting. By the way, I'm following your footsteps literally, 6 months behind. So I'll talk about that. So, of course, everyone hopefully knows Cisco is the worldwide leader in networking, a $45 billion company. But what if I told you that Cisco is really a software company? So if you look at the number of engineers that Cisco has, by far 90+% are really software engineers. But we are really known as a systems or networking hardware company, right? We think like a hardware company. We act like a hardware company. So one of the things that we have done, and I'm in the process of transitioning into a new role, to actually build a software and applications business. inside of Cisco. I've had an opportunity to run large businesses within Cisco, including the core routing. But now I'm going to start a completely new business, and that's why when Vish saw me 2 weeks ago here, when I was running a panel, he says, Shalish, you need to be in this panel. So then he got me introduced. But so the way that Cisco does innovation and entrepreneurship inside is really in kind of two categories. I'm going to talk briefly about both categories, and I'll give you an example of one, and then I'm going to request Buck to provide the other example. So one mechanism that we have used very successfully is this notion of spin-in, right? Where it is not inside the company, yet it is attached to the company Cisco. It's an organization that is sitting outside, driving innovation in a disruptive way, or addressing a completely new market with people that are originally from inside of Cisco, right? So you send them out, essentially, have them be a magnet for attracting industry talent, create something disruptive, and then pull them in. So a great example is Andiamo, which Buck was, of course, the founder and one of the early pioneers in this space. So I'm going to let him speak about that. The second is maybe around 7 years ago, Cisco realized that innovation being the lifeblood of any company, high-tech company like Cisco, we have to actually figure out ways in which we can create completely new large billion-dollar businesses. So we created a group called Emerging Technologies Group, gave it a charter, gave it a level of funding, and said, go, figure out, create a portfolio of businesses, incubate them outside the mainstream schema, similar to what you said. And one great example that has been very successful for us is the telepresence example. Many of you may have seen the ads around that. Telepresence was originally created to create a very different way of collaborating between business partners and between customers for Cisco, in a way that it's a very immersive, lifelike experience. Right? If anybody who has been in a telepresence room, they'll tell you that once you've been in telepresence, there's no other way. Right? No other form of video conferencing works. This was set up, given a small funding, said, okay, use all existing Cisco technologies and outside technologies and build both the hardware and the software required to create this immersive experience. And through this focus, through this separation, and through the funding, of course, funding is important, and that's one of the things that big companies bring, is they have ability to invest. Telepresence has grown to be literally in less than 5 years, to be over $1 billion business, and it has been the catalyst for Cisco to enter in the collaboration business in a much more meaningful way, including acquisition of Tandberg, acquisition of WebEx, and so on. So now collaboration overall in Cisco is probably a $3, $4, $5 billion business, right? And that has all happened in the last 5 years, only because of the initial focus and entrepreneurial activity done by one person, Martin De Beer, around telepresence. So that's the successful example that I want to share.
So I'll speak briefly about the Andiamo experience. For those of you who don't know, basically Cisco spun about 40 engineers in 2001. I was hired to be president, and they basically gave us $70 million to go build a data center switch. 3 years later, there was a large, we developed, I think, 4 major ASICs, 2 million lines of code, a lot of code. And people worked really hard. What the spin out did, and actually grew the organization from originally 40 people, which is the number that left Cisco, to about 330 people, including people in India and China. So most of the people, as Shailesh said, were actually attracted from the outside, from companies like Juniper, for example. We got a great team from Juniper. What the spin-out did did two things. One, it focused people on certain goals. That they said we had to get this done by a certain date. Otherwise, the value of the deal would go away. It had to work, and people would do things like, it was like a startup. It was, not many companies do you have staff meetings start at 9 o'clock at night on Mondays, in the evenings. So, and people were working Saturdays and Sundays because we had a deadline, we had to get a product done. So really focused everybody on the goals and the dates and the results. That was the success of the spin out. The success of the spin in, what happened after we acquired in 2004, was that we grew a business from $0 to a $600 million business in 4 years, which at the time was the fastest growing business unit in Cisco. The secret there was that Cisco is, by and large, a very entrepreneurial company. That is to say, if you have a reason to get something done and go around process, you can convince the right people to do the right thing for the business. So it's not wedded in process so much you can't get things done for something new. And we were really something very new at Cisco. We essentially had an OEM business in a non-OEM company. And we had to create processes and organizations on the fly to handle this kind of situation. So thanks to Cisco being an entrepreneurial company and doing the right thing, I mean, we got it done, and that's what happened to Cisco.
Hey, quick question, just to almost clarify. So in these spin-outs, was the objective technology development with this funding, or were you responsible for a certain amount of revenue over the course of that year or two?
So in a little bit of detail. So Cisco funded us with $70 million. For that, they had the right to acquire the company once we had product. The value of the deal depended upon, because the value of the deal depended upon, if they did the deal, if they acquired us, the value of our sales a year after the acquisition. So if the value was, if we sold 0, the deal was 0. If the deal was if we sold $100 million, or actually it was $132 million, I think, the first year, it was a multiple of Cisco's PE. So it's essentially a non-dilutive deal with Cisco. So the value we created for Cisco was the value that we're acquired by.
Wow. Okay. So you had real incentive to grow sales in that way too.
Yeah, exactly. And if schedule slipped, the date on the valuation point didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
So the engineers had a real incentive to get it done.
So it's a win-win for everyone, right? So it's great for Cisco because it allows us to enter into a new market segment and maybe even disrupt our own products along the way. It's a great win-win for those Cisco people who went there because they're going to drive new innovation and get wealthy in the process. And it's great for Cisco to attract new talent into the company because of the industry.
Yeah. Right. I only wanted to clarify, so thanks for helping there. So please go ahead. Let's hear the Google perspective.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Samir, and I'm responsible at Google for what we call our shopping business. And I like to think of shopping as actually a fairly sizable now startup within Google, which in itself is a company that I think prides itself on. We don't really know what the future holds, and so we bet on a lot of different things internally, most of which internally fail, and we're okay with that. Shopping has, I think, been fortunate enough to graduate from that and is now becoming quite a large business, which we can dive into a little bit in some of the future questions about trials and tribulations of getting there. But since all the other panelists offered up some very large examples of things getting started and then graduating to billions of dollars, I wanted to, instead of focusing on the entire shopping business, I wanted to focus on a very, very small example of where an individual engineer was able to get something started and make it really successful. Many of you may know the stories that sometimes are told about how a lot of products at Google came about in some part by accident, quote unquote. Gmail, for example, was started by 3 engineers and a product manager in some of their spare time because they thought email was just terrible. And Google News was started by a particular engineer because during 9/11 he had a lot of trouble keeping up with the news, and he felt like there must be a better way.
similar to that, in the shopping space, we had about 3.5 years ago, we were all sitting around talking about how mobile was going to be a big deal and everybody was using their smartphone, and we really ought to develop a shopping-specific application for this thing that was reasonably new at the time called Android, and that would be probably a great idea. And that's sort of what pointy-haired bosses sometimes do. They sit around and they talk about great ideas. And I got an email literally that evening, out of the blue, from an engineer I'd never met in our New York office. And he said, I know you work on the shopping business, and I have built something and I'd like you to check it out. And he attached an APK, which is an Android package, which I can install on my phone. And it was a fully functioning barcode scanning app, which used a set of APIs which we had made internally available to any developer. So here we were talking about the future and building, presentations and plans and whatever, and here he was, he'd actually done it. And he came to us and said, I built this in my spare time, and I have a couple other people who've been working on this with me, and what do you think? So I used to work for Marissa Meyer for quite a while, and her message to me always at Google was, your job is to do nothing except for look for these kinds of events specifically, where you find a really talented person with drive and passion for something, and then your job is to clear the way for them, and to just give them a ton of runway. And that's essentially what we did. The app is now called Shopper, Google Shopper. It is one of the largest shopping apps on the Android in Android market, and now it has quite a large team working on it. And we can talk about sort of that transition, I think, in future discussions. But it is I think the kind of classic thing that we love to see at Google, and the kind of culture that I think we've got, and it's the reason I really love working there.
And what did it take to go from those couple people letting you know to that kind of getting extra resources and getting awareness and that whole momentum building? I think we kind of glossed over some of that.
Momentum, at least at our company, builds on things that people love. So one of the biggest things that we do is we take consumer apps that we build, our consumer experiences, and we get them out to the entire company in a process we call dog fooding, which is nothing more than, as many have used in other companies, is just making it available to everyone internally. And what tends to happen is people vote with their fingers. That is, they decide what things they want to spend their time on at Google, and what things they want to use their fingers to code with based upon what they think is cool. And the Shopper app in particular was something that when we got out to first our team, and then to the larger Google audience, immediately had 6 or 7 additional people who wanted to be part of it, contributing different pieces to it. And we encourage that.
So it's literally the recruiting of more technical talent, not the recruiting of management interest that builds the momentum.
Oftentimes at Google, management interest is a function of how many people are really interested in working on something. So one of the sort of principles is if you hire Eric Schmidt used to say to lots of his teams when he would meet with them, I want to understand why your engineers want to work on this. And it was a function of saying, if we go around and build, it's not hard to understand where Google builds its offices. We build our offices next to the biggest computer science universities in the world. It's a pretty straightforward function. And if we hire those kinds of folks, you're not going to retain them or keep them interested unless they are working on things that are truly interesting. And that doesn't mean that all of those are good ideas. There's a process of culling, and it's often the company itself that will look at those things. And because we are consumers, we have that benefit where we can look at these things and say, look, it's just not very good, or it's wonderful. I want to be part of that, and that's typically how it works.
Okay, great. And how about from the SAP and Cisco perspective? Is it also attracting more engineering talent to get the lift, or is it more of let me explain to the management what the value of this is? You can do it either order.
So yeah, so no, yeah. absolutely. I just want to make sure he's prepared. So I think that it works in sort of different ways.
Yeah.
Because I think there's one method which I described earlier was kind of the structured way of driving it sort of maybe top down, but with getting ideas from around the company, right?
Yeah.
Second is I think this is a really new set of innovations that we are working on, which is how do you actually utilize emerging markets and both in terms of emerging market customers as the driver and basing new innovation in emerging markets where the energy levels are very different. Honestly, the energy levels in, let's say, many of these places are different. So what we do is, in many instances, the number of engineers that are working in, let's say, classic routing and so on, the ones that are getting, let's say, a new group has been created. If folks are keenly interested in going there, that becomes now a magnet or a driving force for additional investment in that area.
Okay, all right. And so, but if I can pick up on a little thread there.
Yeah.
So what was happening at the Google case was that you got engineers who are also representing their customer base. And so if you get them, you're kind of killing two birds with one stone. In this case, I picked up the thread on the emerging market. So is this about going outside the building and getting the customer interest and then convincing enough people that there is that external customer interest? Is that the mechanism that's being used here?
Look, it's the customer interest that is driving it actually. And the point I wanted to make was the customer interest doesn't have to be a traditional sort of US or Europe type of customer. It is actually the emerging markets customer that is driving either product innovation around either cost, feature, business model, all of these, the combination of all of these.
Yeah. So am I going too far in translating what you're saying? That almost don't waste your time walking inside the halls and saying, I've got a great idea to other people in the building. Instead, go spend some time outside and bring back some evidence that this is value
That's
out
one
there.
method. I don't want to say that that's the only method, right? Because in fact, I have later on, if we get a minute, there are two specific ways in which we drive internal and external innovation and ideas.
Yeah.
That is systematized, which actually transcends everything from customer to partner to engineer to employee and so on.
Okay, so we'll come back to that, right? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Go-
sorry.
no,
A little more Cisco
Yeah.
than SAP?
Yeah, just to finish that on to Cisco, and to your point, the issue for Cisco is it's not trying to hire engineers, it's not trying to do innovation, it's trying to find new businesses that it can grow. So that's the issue. All the other things drive that, and to comparing Cisco to versus Google, the engineers are the customers. If you're a consumer of the goods, that's great. For Cisco, it's a little bit different. Our engineers and marketing people and sales people are not generally consumers of the IT equipment. So that's the difference between here and there. But the issue is still the same. Is trying to figure out what makes sense and what can grow as a business, and then that will attract the innovation of the engineers.
Okay, all right, great. Go ahead.
Look, SAP is a little bit different from a cultural perspective as well. I think it's a much more German company. It's much more a conservative company, and innovation tends to be vetted over a longer period of time with lots of processes and things like that. But I wanted to pick up on something that Samir said as well. The best, everybody says it all the time. Great ideas are a dime a dozen. Everybody has great concepts. If you really want to get traction, at least from my experience, you build something, and better yet, not just build something, but co-innovate with a customer. Get customer feedback, get positive customer engagement, and then bring that and get the from my perspective, it's not about convincing management, but it's getting the field, getting the salespeople excited about selling a new solutions, having a new market opportunity. Once you get that kind of momentum, then it snowballs and you have a shot.
Okay, all right, great. So I think that's a really healthy story, and I can see it coming together in terms of picking up that thread on the customer interest, that pulls in more engineering interest, and almost what wasn't said here, but I'll say it and I'll let you disagree if I'm wrong, but it's almost like let the management come to you. Like, go and work on the customers, work on evangelizing it with the rest of your team, and when it gets big enough, management themselves will come to you. You don't have to go and sell them on it, because the customers will help you do it. Yeah, okay, he's saying no, so go ahead. Tell me why that's not right.
Nothing happens unless something's funded, you know,
okay.
and there's always constraints on funding, and there's more people want money than not. So if you're going to sit there and expect people to look for you and give you money, you know, there are lots of other people raising their hands saying, you know, mine is just as good.
Well, you know, and the other sort of point is that management is not the enemy always, right? You know, it turns out there are some smart
Always,
people
not
in the right, not always, right? Most of the time.
Yeah,
But
okay.
management does have, you know, in many instances, sort of vision and ideas and so on, which can be relevant. So what I'm saying is that there could be a top-down
Yeah.
drive as well as a bottom. We can't exclude one or the other.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, I think the funding thing is obviously always an issue. Sometimes you're supportive. You know, certainly a lot of the success that my team has had was because I've had top-down executive sponsorship. But even with that, you know, one person, even one board member, only has a limited amount of influence over the entire organization. I've actually found that in terms of engaging with customers and getting the customer buy-in. When you're in a moment of crisis, when there's a customer escalation, and you're able to kind of turn that into a big win, you're able to kind of, because that's the time when the organization is I dare say panicked, and is willing to break all the rules to make something happen. So if you're able to actually show a way to do that, that achieves some sort of success and rescue kind of the organization from this particular situation, I found those as kind of catalyst moments to be able to actually influence a lot of change.
Okay, all right. Back to pain causes the entrepreneurial opportunity. Do you want to make a comment on that, or?
I just wanted to quickly
Yeah.
add that. I mean, I think that one of the key things, at least that I've taken away from the experience, is even though every company has its own way of encouraging these things, I think one of the things that is really helpful beyond. So I completely agree with Sam. It is about doing something and having a kernel of something. PowerPoint presentations, just like if you're going to raise money externally, don't speak as loudly as, hey, let me show you the product. Okay. So there is a matter of like, how do you create time, in your day and your week, to A, recruit a set of folks who are going to do this, and then B, give them the time to really dig in a little bit. You've got to create that space for folks somehow. The other thing that you were bringing up, when do you get management involved, et cetera. I think that regardless of how management encourages this kind of entrepreneurialism inside a company, and every company has its own way of doing it, I think one of the things that has helped us is just dependency reduction as much as possible. So, how can you get in as much done as possible, relying on as few things as possible? You can't go that far, actually, in many cases. But if the first thing you need to do to make any progress is to have a big conversation with a whole bunch of folks, there's just a drag effect, right? And so, how can you get this as small as possible to make the biggest, impact, and then kind of go from there? And that's actually sometimes half the problem of getting started.
Okay, all right. So basically, what we've done up till now is we've talked about examples, and we've talked about how you bootstrap your way up. I think it's time to go to the next layer of this conversation, which is what goes wrong. As you've observed these things, what are the things to watch out for as you're on this momentum building path? Any order will be fine. Whoever's got the biggest crisis.
I think to follow up directly, when somebody says let's have an alignment meeting, that's when you need to start running. I'm sure most of you come from big companies, and when I first joined SAP, I was part of the internal consulting organization, quote-unquote innovation consulting part of the organization. And we would be asked to take a look at something, and the first thing that we would do is we would kind of find 12 other organizations within the company that's doing the exact same thing, have trying to, if you're part of SAP's now 65,000 person company, if you have to align everything that you do with everything else that everybody's doing, there's no way you're going to make any progress.
But, so are you saying that one of the dangers is basically doing something that a lot of other people are doing in the company and that you just don't happen to know about in the beginning?
No, I think that's one aspect is, making sure that you're not duplicating something that anybody else is doing, but I think the main point is, what Samir was talking about, is making sure that, you have enough control to control your own destiny. There's not too many dependencies along the way for your success.
So I want to make a sort of supporting comment on that.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the nice things about with the spin out and when we were running as an independent company, I want to contrast what was like running the group outside of Cisco and inside Cisco. Exactly. Once I'm inside Cisco, all of a sudden I'm spending my time in these manager meetings. When I was outside Cisco, we didn't have to worry about compatibility, right? We didn't have to worry about alignment. We didn't have to worry about strategy. We knew we're building this and just this, and so we didn't have to worry about any of that. And then when I was inside Cisco, I saw the kind of conflicts when with again what was the second? No, yeah, exactly. They're created conflicts. So I saw it on the other side, the potential conflicts going in. So in fact, you have to smooth those over. So absolutely, it's absolutely right. You have to be careful of fitting in exactly.
I have a nice slide on this.
All right, this is the time
How
of
do
the
you-
slide.
Is there how do we get the presentation up?
With all this technical
No, it's
expertise,
already loaded up,
we need
so
some help with the
put it
projection.
Oh, gone for dinner. Or AV guy is gone for
Here,
dinner.
That is loaded up, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just,
Okay.
you'll have it.
So I just put something together which says, what's the problem? Why is it that big companies can't do innovation very well? So,
All right, let's give a minute for this to warm up and then,
right.
I don't know if the controls are back there or up here.
In the meanwhile, let me just tell you a story of what did not succeed. Right? Just for the fun of it while this is coming up.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
telepresence was a really good story of success, but there's also another example which was actually a failure, and that is I don't know if you saw the ads for Yumi. Yumi was taking telepresence and moving it into the consumer world. Now, it was a great idea, great concept, right? Except that if you look at the fact that you can't compete against free, with your Skype, right? Yes, you're giving a slightly higher definition, sort of, and more immersive experience for collaboration. But hey, Skype is free, and the experience is not so bad. So we just could not make it work. And I think that's an example of where, if you see the market not moving in the direction that you thought it will, or if there's competition that you did not anticipate, which is really taking things away, you move very fast. So we killed it right away.
Okay, all
So
right.
if you just
So
move
that's
through the
a bit
slides.
of fail-fast approach.
Right.
Learn to recognize it's not the right thing.
So I just want to, this is the, here it is. Why large companies struggle with innovation, right? So first is too much money. So what does that mean? Of course, when Buck needs 70 million, he needs 70 million because he's going to build a system that has ASICs and hardware and software. But in many instances, big companies throw too much money at the problem, and that creates sort of bloat, right? So you got to, sometimes constraints actually drive creativity, right? Second is, too much time. Right? That doesn't work, right? You need to be aggressive in terms of schedule, in terms of bringing things to market. You said earlier, right? SAP is an 18 to 24 months or enterprise software track. You got to be on a 60 to 90-day track, right, for bringing out products. Too many people. Now, clearly, a lot of times what happens is big companies throw huge amount of people at this. It really is about small, very rapid and nimble teams. Then too much love. This is your point, right? And your point, which is, if you get stuck inside the big company process and alignment and all those fun things, you will never get out of it. So it's really important to be somewhat separate, different, not necessarily linked into the same set of rules.
And is there a backlash for getting out of that track?
Backlash as in?
Yeah, when you start ignoring all those other things and you go into your little team
Yes.
and you've been ignoring them for a long time, eventually does the organization not come back after you? And
Well, so there, it's a question of when you are ready to quote unquote graduate, right? And there's a scaling point, the success measure that comes, and then of course you need to adapt to the sort of the rest of the company, right? So, but there's also this issue of too much hate. Okay, what does too much hate mean? Too much hate is that I'm running core routing, right? And I know what's best. What do you mean? You're going to tell me something different. So this is the notion where there is some level of NIH, there's some level of, I know best, right? I'm running my business. So that's where the notion of sort of creating a separate group to incubate things and to, pull them together comes in. And the last one is also very interesting, which is black sheep. And this is the notion that that the measurement systems